and they can also read it in the Rogue Gazette as I go along.
Of course.
I'm saying that because I hope that the government will next year present an electronic copy for the people of this country. Thank you.
An electronic copy was presented.
Not at the time.
We haven't got our copy yet, though. Don't start yet. I want to follow you.
Mr. Speaker, I'll start my response to the Progressive Labour Party's 2023-24 budget by summarizing some of the comments from the 2013 SAGE report, which are as relevant today as they were 10 years ago. Throughout its more than 400 years of settlement, Bermuda has braved the winds of adversity, causing us to punch above our weight and testing our mettle at every pass. Through it all, Bermudians proved to be resilient and innovative by responding to adversity with confidence and vigor. Mr. Speaker, as a people, we developed a pragmatic ingenuity which ensured that the island continued to develop from strength to strength. We learned to capitalize on a service-based economy, leveraged our stunning natural beauty and a gift of hospitality to create a buffer of affluence and a level of comfort for its residents that few other countries could offer. Sadly, for the first time in Bermuda's history, this buffer is gone. Bermuda is laboring beneath unprecedented costs, which continue to rise. The country's substantial debt is seemingly unabated and threatens to destabilize our fragile financial foundation. Our population continues to decline. Bermuda's two principal industries, tourism and international business, are facing increased aggressive competition. Bermudians, who were once the rival of our neighbors to the south, boasting to have more than one job by choice, are today faced with rampant unemployment that hovers over the island like a dark cloud that is determined to remain in place. The scenario is unfamiliar to us, and like a rough tag on the back of our shirt, it's an uncomfortable label to bear, especially for a proud country, when reputation, synonymous with adjectives like premier and blue chip destination. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the winds of change that were with us in 2013 are with us again in 2022 and 23, and there is no end in sight. The One Bermuda Alliance believes that these challenging winds are not due to climate change or pending hurricanes. They are due to the government's mismanagement of the public purse. How can the country raise $50 million to close a current account deficit, as suggested by the Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel's assessment, when it cannot effectively manage and recover the $300 million due to it in its accounts receivable? Why penalize our people and our corporate citizens with increased taxes when the government has totally mismanaged the recovery of hundreds of million dollars due to it in taxes and fees? Clearly, Progressive Labour Party government cannot get its house in order despite the offers of assistance by members of our international business community. It is a clear sign that the Burke government has had an epic failure, and they cannot continue to beat their chest and proclaim victory in the evidence of these failures, especially at the expenses of Bermudians. Mr. Speaker, for years, the One Bermuda Alliance has been sounding the alarm for the need to attract new business and people to the island. Those cries have fallen on deaf ears. This government has known for quite some time that the size and composition of our population can only be addressed by increasing immigration and strengthening and expanding Bermuda's workforce. This should have been one of the their top priorities, as our workforce challenge is likely the biggest challenge facing Bermuda and her people today. If we are to enjoy an economic recovery, Bermuda needs to expand its current workforce. There is absolutely no doubt about it. The Progressive Labor Party must develop a bold prospectus that will be attractive to potential investors and attract human capital, that will bring jobs to Bermuda and create jobs in Bermuda. This prospectus must help us to build trust and a real bond within our business community through a sensible plan to deploy taxes and provide the much-needed business support through prioritization and delivery of green investments, through strategic investments in tourism and in hospitality, through supporting the arts and creative sectors, through providing effective seniors care programs, supporting the philanthropic sector, and absolutely to focus on the critical need to support our students. Mr. Speaker, other than the management of the pandemic, the Brett administration has exerted little to no leadership since getting re-elected. Government members repeat what they hear people say on the street, and they say they're listening to the people, which is not bad, but it's not enough. What people are looking for and need is true leadership. We need people who see the problems, analyze them, come up with workable solutions, and then execute them. All too often, the PLP government solutions are unpopular, which is why nothing gets done. After months, no, years of calling for immigration reform, in February 2023, there has been no significant movement from the government. Mr. Speaker, we need a leader who will eliminate waste in government. We know that's not easy to hand out. We know that it is easy to hand out giveaways and throw away money, but it's more difficult to eliminate waste. And this does not mean automatic reduction of heads. Mr. Speaker, as most of us know, there are thousands of Bermudians living in the United Kingdom. Many of them are young people who we desperately need to support healthcare and government financial initiatives. The One Bermuda Alliance has been sounding the alarm of the issue for years, and yet there is no clear plan to retain or attract people. Our dwindling population is Bermuda's #1 problem. Mr. Speaker, while on the topic of people leaving the island, we also are witnessing a lack of confidence in the government's leadership. Businesses are closing or contracting, and the disturbing instance of youth violence occurs on an almost regular basis with no end in sight. Again, the government has failed the people of Bermuda. They have not provided the resources or social support to curb our country's rise in violence, deaths, and other antisocial behaviors. Mr. Speaker, without debate, per capita, Bermuda is one of the most expensive countries to live in. And they say the struggle is real. People are finding ways and means of existing by immigrating to other jurisdictions. Nearly 8,000 people have left because many Bermudians cannot afford to remain in Bermuda and live with dignity. The cost of health care is one of the highest in the world. Food prices continue to increase almost daily. The cost of bank loans and energy is off the charts, and there is the perceived dearth of opportunities and jobs for our young people. Is it any wonder why people are leaving in droves? From a business perspective, the cost of doing business is also one of the most highest in the world. Business owners must face high employment costs, rising energy costs, healthcare costs, payroll taxes, and the exorbitant cost of housing. Mr. Speaker, in addition, investor confidence has been battered by the increasing cost of living, the unprecedented increase of inflation for the past year, and the rising interest rates course, which appears to continue unabated. Then there were the discussions about the change in our sovereignty status and the real concerns about Bermuda's economic and social stability and certainty. Our economic prospects were dealt a severe blow, especially in the retail, service, and tourism sectors. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to international business, despite a hardening market due to the trailing impact of Hurricane Ian in 2021, we are continuously challenged by competitive global insurance and financial services markets. The same currently applies to our life assurance and annuity industry, which is gaining great momentum despite exorbitant costs of doing business in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, despite efforts to mitigate the financial impacts as in other countries, the impact of the pandemic and the challenges just mentioned have all exposed deficiencies in Bermuda's fiscal prudence and management, and has also exposed the weakness of Bermuda's social, economic, and political landscape. Mr. Speaker, candidly speaking, the One Bermuda Alliance believes that PLP government has failed the people of Bermuda. They failed our corporate citizens in the domestic market, and after 10 years of government, collectively, we are no better off. When it comes to the accumulation of wealth in Bermuda, the Premier is bullish and a sunny outlook for our economy next year may have been driven by the growth of his personal wealth. But for the average working class person, and even the
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I think the honorable member needs to withdraw that defamatory, and it reflects directly to something that's been circulated on social media. I think it's out of order for this budget. And it's untrue.
Mr. Speaker, this was not intended to be defamatory in any manner.
Let me address the point of order. Normally, we do allow the budget statements to be read without the interruption. And it's not customary that we deal with an interruption during this time. I'm just going to ask the member to be mindful of turns and comments that are made. And member, I'm still talking to you on your seat. And I'm going to ask the member just to address the comment at the time that you do have to speak later in the day. But it's been customary that we do allow them to have a clean run on the presentation of the budget and the reply to the budget. Okay? I've ruled. I've asked you, you can hold on to your comment, and you can introduce your comment, make your comment when you have the opportunity to speak. Mr. Officer Sneer?
But for the average working class person, and even members of this honorable House, they have not seen or enjoyed the same accumulation of wealth during the past 10 years. Mr. Speaker, as you know, our small population of under 65,000 people are burdened with a debt of $3.142 billion and an annual interest expense of $130 million, which are both unsustainable. After 10 years in the seat, the government has failed the people of Bermuda because of the financial burden. Our people are no better off in the long term. In the same vein, let's look at the financials. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, government debt, liabilities, and guarantees exceeded $7 billion. The annual deficit for 2023 is more than $7 million above the original estimate of $77 million. The annual revenue to debt ratio lies at approximately 275%, while the performance benchmark is 80%. Considering these statistics, a Financial Alliance underwriter indicated that if she was underwriting a company with this type of performance, she would have rejected the application and recommended that the company be wound up. Mr. Speaker, on the demographic side, our own government statistics revealed that 10% of Bermuda's population is now living below the poverty line. Mr. Speaker, one wonders what the Progressive Labor Party has been focused on throughout their reign. They should have racked up a string of successes. Instead, all we see is a trail of debt that has ballooned since they took over managing the public purse. Mr. Speaker, how can the Premier paint such a hopeful picture for the people of Bermuda? Again, something is wrong with his rose-colored glasses. His leadership has failed the people of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, one of the Progressive Labor Party government's top priorities should be to ensure that tools are in place to boost our economic growth, reduce inflation, eliminate national debt, and reduce the $300 million due from the people and government of Bermuda. If we seek to restore confidence and personal wealth, the government must address their own outstanding accounts receivables. In so doing, Bermudians will have more money in their pockets, and more government services and programs will be made available, as our government's $130.4 million annual debt service obligations will be reduced. Mr. Speaker, last year's societal disruption in Bermuda was grave, and unfortunately, it will continue in the coming year as we have yet to turn tourism around, which employs 14% of the workforce. The government states that inflation is currently 5.6%, the highest it's been in 40 years. This figure is highly debatable compared to other jurisdictions. Even 5.6% inflation is a silent killer of hopes and dreams for Bermudians, both young and old. The skyrocketing inflation has impacted salaries and our real purchasing power. Mr. Speaker, considering this grim reality, we must examine new ways to work together towards a common end as we collectively chart our way through the path of economic recovery and rehabilitation. Bermuda is small and agile enough to do it. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Economic Recovery Plan needs to be more than aspirational. Just like running a business, the plan must have measurable timelines and milestones so that progress can be tracked, and moreover, so that we can define our roadmap to economic recovery. As it currently stands, the government's economic recovery plan has proven to be ineffective in delivering real growth to the economy and a large portion of our economic well-being. Once again, I reinstate that the government cannot continue to be proud of its failures. It has by no means executed its economic recovery plan. Hence, they are trying to create and deliver a second and improved recovery plan, which has yet to see the light of day. Why not fix the original plan? Mr. Speaker, it is critical that a vibrant economy must be rebuilt. An economy where jobs are created with a focus on equity, diversity, fair trade, and real opportunities for Bermudians. We must find investors to support small businesses and our local economy. And we all must buy Bermuda. This rebuilding process should be supported by a realistic blueprint. We cannot continue to listen to the same old dusted off budget promises year after year, which now reads like an all too familiar yet boring bedtime story. It's also a story that no one wants to read or believe. Bermuda needs a recovery plan that is realistic, workable, and addresses Bermuda's fiscal framework, ever-growing debt, and infrastructure investment strategies. If we use all the resources made available to the government by all of Bermuda stakeholders, including talented C-suite executives from international business, our domestic corporate clients, citizens, and other stakeholders, we could well have been on a path to economic recovery. But no, the government and their team has crafted an aspirational growth plan which has been ineffective in addressing Bermuda's economic malaise and recovery. In fact, the recovery plan has been so ineffective that the Minister of Economic Development and his team are now reviewing it and adjusting its efficacy and effectiveness. Mr. Speaker, the PLP's 2023-24 budget lacks courage. It should support Bermudians by creating new opportunities in the trades and by helping people to develop skills needed to succeed. The Progressive Labour Party government should continue to help businesses grow and innovate by creating incentives to hire workers and providing access to financing to scale up businesses. Government must keep out of the way of businesses and let them do their job, and concurrently ensure that guardrails are in place to ensure that Bermuda's reputation is not compromised. In addition, more support must be provided to our financial service industries, especially for reinsurance and insurance companies, mutual fund and fund administration companies, and trust companies. Additional support must also be given to our retailers, restaurants, healthcare, and tourism sectors. The continued reduction of payroll taxes is not enough. What our local businesses need is access to capital, as most of these businesses have depleted their savings or their retained earnings and are all spent. They also need a more relaxed and efficient employee recruitment program, which is supported by workforce development programs and more efficient immigration processing policies for our guest workers. Mr. Speaker, the other item to be highlighted is the salary increases that will be coming to the 4,362 public service employees. This despite the economic challenges. What do we tell people in the private sector who have not had a salary increase in the past 5 to 10 years? Are they expecting an increase now that the government has set the standard? Given the huge deficit, where is the funding coming from for these salary increases? I repeat, where is the money coming from for these salary increases? Are these pay rises linked to employee output or efficiencies, as is the case in the private sector? Mr. Speaker, let us not forget that Bermuda is part of a global community. Its economy and success is dramatically influenced by external influences. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to look at overseas jurisdictions, which are very important to us because they fuel our economy and because we are dependent upon them. Global economy. Mr. Speaker, according to the International Money Fund, the global economy will slow down this year before rebounding in 2024. But a global recession is not in their baseline. The important factors shaping the outlook are, on the downside of Russia's war in Ukraine and the global fight against inflation. On the upside, the reopening of the China economy. Overall, they have a mild upward revision to their projections. The global economy has shown much resilience. Labor markets are tight, household spending and business investments remain strong, and the European economies proved to be resilient against energy crisis. Consequently, global growth is expected to slow from 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. The slowdown will be pronounced for advanced economies. China and India will account for 50% of global growth. Global headline inflation is expected to fall from 8.8% in 2022 to 4.3% in 2024. Core inflation, however, is more persistent and remains too elevated. To sum up, barring new shocks, 2023 could be the year of turning points, with growth bottoming out and inflation decreasing. This information is from Pierre Oliver Gourinchas, the IMF's chief economist. Within that same organization, Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the IMF, said, 2023 will be tougher than last year as the US and EU and China see their economies slow. It comes as the war in the Ukraine, rising prices, high interest rates, and the spread of COVID in China weigh on their global economies. She said that we expect 1/3 of the world's economy to be in recession. Even for countries that are not in recession, it would feel like a recession for hundreds of millions of people. She went on to say that while our baseline avoids global recession over the next year, the odds of one are uncomfortably high. Europe, however, will not escape recession, and the US is teetering on the verge of it now, she said. Mr. Speaker, I'll now move to the US economy. Mr. Speaker, as the United States is Bermuda's largest trading partner, it's also important that we speak to the prospects of the US economy for 2023. Leading US economists forecast that the economic weakness will intensify and spread more widely throughout the US economy over the coming months, leading to a recession in early 2023. This outlook is associated with persistent inflation and the Federal Reserve's hawkishness. In December 2022, JP Morgan indicated that the US economy will likely slow down further in 23 and enter a mild recession. They take the view that US economy is going to expand at a muted 0.5 to 1% pace in 2023, as measured by real GDP, which incorporates our prediction that for a mild recession, beginning in late 2023. This would lead to a further deceleration of growth from 1.5 to 2% in 22, 6% in 2021, and the long-term average annual growth rate of 1.8%. Considering the major components of the gross domestic product, they expect that real consumer spending will rise approximately 2% in 2023, which assumes wage growth of 4 to 5%, inflation moderating to 3.4%, and further downward of excess accumulated pandemic savings. Mr. Speaker, with the above forecasts from the leaders of the global economy, what does this mean for Bermuda and to the lives of Bermudians in 2023? It means a challenging economy with a flat to a possible 1.5 GDP growth. Mr. Speaker, inflation and the cost of living inflation and the cost of living increases will thrive and cause havoc on our daily lives and our Bermudian families and our Bermudian lifestyle. This cost of living crisis continues to be the biggest and most challenging issue facing us. Currently, inflation and the escalating cost of living in Bermuda is hovering around 3.5%. This rate appears to be unrealistic and flawed, as the inflation rate of our biggest trading partner currently lies at 6.4%, which has been crippling. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to attracting new inward investment to this country, the Burt government has failed the people of this country, and as a consequence, our people are no better off. Mr. Speaker, it is with pride that I state that during the 5-year term of the One Bermuda Alliance government, the government was awash with new inward capital. The One Bermuda Alliance had the Lauren Hotel, the One Bermuda Alliance had the St. Regis Hotel, the One Bermuda Alliance had the America's Cup, and we have Acorn's colossal investment in the development of our award-winning L.F. Wade International Airport, which provides a world-class experience to locals, tourists, and others when traveling to or from Bermuda. Where was the new inward capital for the $500 million airport planned by one of the former Progressive Labor Party premiers during a previous PLP administration? Where was the new inward capital that was required for the shovels to go in ground in 2022 for the development of Southampton Princess? Yes, the pink elephant that sits empty on the hill just off South Shore Road in Southampton. Mr. Speaker, the glaring lack of new foreign investment on our economy supports the premise that there will be little growth within our economy for the foreseeable future. Mr. Speaker, one of our local respected economists pointed out that the current lack of investment showed that entrepreneurs and other drivers of the economy had little faith in government policy, with the risk that the economy will remain stagnant. Mr. Speaker, inward investment spending is crucial. It is an excellent indicator of the likelihood of Bermuda's recovery and economic expansion potential. Mr. Speaker, what does the 2023 global dynamics and outlook mean for Bermuda? Unlike views from the Premier Bert's rose-colored glasses, this will not be as bullish as he professes. Instead, there will be more job losses for Bermudians, especially in beauty salons, fitness-related facilities, and businesses within the hospitality sector. Apparel stores will also continue to decline as people are shopping online. It also means a 15 to 20% closure of retail stores in Hamilton in the past 2 years. Closures. Retail business will continue to face the added threat of closing because of their commercial financing, supply chain challenges, and inflationary wholesale prices. They will likely not be able to pay their overhead costs, rents, and other expenses due to the dramatic decline in revenues of small businesses, which play a vital role in Bermuda's economic engine. There will be an increase as a result of an increase in the cost of personal mortgage, which in some banks will increase 4 times over a series of months, and the added cost of credit card interest. It also means the construction industry, there was an estimated value of construction projects for the coming year will be down 30 to 35%, as there are no major hotels coming online in 2023. Low-wage earners who clean, prepare, and serve food within the private and public sectors will continue to be significantly impacted. They will experience the most job redundancies and will be hit with an increasing unemployment. For those who have been able to retain their jobs, they likely have not had a wage increase for years or are faced with reduced working hours. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda's debt continues to rise unabatedly because of the irresponsible spending and because the government has had current account deficits in all of the past 10 years. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier this year, Bermuda can expect our national debt will hover around 3.29 and $4 billion during the next fiscal year. According to the latest report from the government's Fiscal Responsibility Panel, its revenue to debt remains at 275%, which is significantly above the target of 80%, which is best practice. This ratio has been at this level for a number of years with no improvement. This should be a matter of grave concern. In addition, let us not forget the PRP government's total liability portfolio. In addition to the 3.29 in national debt, we should acknowledge the unfunded liability in our government pension plans, our social insurance programs, and the sovereign guarantees, which, when combined with our sovereign debt, the total liability is around $7 billion. Mr. Speaker, the Fiscal Responsibility Panel said in their 2020 report, and remains so today, that an adverse but far from inconceivable scenario would see government debt on an unsustainable trajectory, leading to a credit rating downgrade and higher interest rates on new debt, the risk of large emergency tax increases and spending, and the possibility of capital flight and a foreign exchange crisis. They also indicated that given the fiscal position and the limited progress of the government acting on their recommendations, they are concerned that Bermuda will have little fiscal or macroeconomic policy spaces to address any crystallization of these risks. Over the long term, their key concerns is still domestic, i.e., the island's shrinking workforce and aging population. This challenge will put ever-increasing pressure on both taxes and spending. The issue is not about whether action is needed or even what action is needed, but when and how. Mr. Speaker, while on the matters of debt burden, did you know that the average man, woman, and child living in Bermuda at the end of January 2023 is responsible for approximately $50,251 of the national debt of $3.14 billion. I repeat, for every woman, child, they are responsible for $50,251. Did you also note that for fiscal year 2023, each adult and child residing in Bermuda was responsible for paying $2,241.69 in interest of the total interest expense of $138.29 million for the current fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, did you also know that each man, woman, and child currently living in Bermuda is responsible for $52,492.69 for debt repayment and this year's loan interest expense, and more than 90% of the interest payments of the $138,290 million does not stay in Bermuda. It's paid overseas to the note holders. Debt service. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda's annual debt service is completely out of control. This money is paid to our local and international bondholders. For the year ending March 31st, 2024, the annual expense will total $130 million, approximately 11.78% of the estimated total of government expenditures. This is the fourth large government expense after the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and Ministry of National Security. It is almost bigger than the Ministry of Youth and Sports, Community Affairs and Social Development, and Seniors, and Home Affairs, and Transport combined, Mr. Speaker. And most of the money leaves Bermuda. it does not circulate in our economy for further use by our people. Revenues. From our perspective, nothing new and nothing substantive was introduced to deliver an economic trajectory which will show revenue growth for the country. The government's economic recovery plan is not robust enough. The Premier's digital industry focus is not creating the jobs that he said they would. Recent statistics indicate that only approximately 40 jobs for locals have resulted, and the industry is currently having its share of global negative press, which could be a real reputational risk to Bermuda. Having showcased the challenges, let us not forget and acknowledge the valued contributions of our international business sector and the gradual recovery of tourism. Job creation. On the matter of job creation, nothing significant was presented to stimulate job creation. There are no opportunities in the agricultural and fishing industries to support food security. Airlift. Here it should be noted that Bermuda's air capacity will remain below 2019 levels if Bermuda has a limited number of hotel rooms and hotel convention centers. It is fair to say that the situation will not improve until we have an additional 600 rooms and a convention center on the island. We applaud the Air Service Development Committee for their work, and we hope that the results of their efforts will address our airlift challenges, which is vital to the success of our tourism and international business sector. Accounts receivables, again, this is just the impact of the global economy. The accounts receivable, the current pre-budget report reaffirmed that the PLP government's tax collection and accounts receivable portfolio across the ministry is still growing. In fact, the report indicated that it grew 5% at the end of the current fiscal year. As a result of the continued pressure to have this matter addressed, we are pleased to see the government has presented the beginning of an accounts receivable recovery plan. Once again, they want to raise taxes, which they have not been able to collect. Mr. Speaker, guarantee portfolio. The government has not addressed how they are managing the government's guarantee portfolio, which, by the way, is not charged against the debt ceiling. The guarantee portfolio is valued at approximately $1.138 billion and includes $2.93 million for the Bermuda Housing Corporation, $7.8 million for WEDCO, $1.5 million for BEDC, $787 million for the Bermuda Hospital Board, $165 million for Morgan's Point, $10 million for the Tourism Authority, $2.7 million for the Bermuda Gaming Commission, and $25 million for the Hotel Bermuda Holdings, $30 million for the BLDC, $10 million for Bermudiana Development Company Limited, $3.2 million for National Sports Center, and $2.5 million for the Info Fund. The sources for these values is from Bermuda government's estimate of revenues for the year 2022-23. Bermuda's fintech sector, as the Royal Gazette aptly indicated in the December 19th issue, Bermuda's fintech sector has experienced its fair share of failures in the past 4 years and is now feeling the effect of the high-profile collapse of FTX, the world's second largest cryptocurrency exchange. Other notable headlines include locally registered companies which have filed liquidation petitions to the Supreme Court. Money launderings where a local executive in the industry was extradited to the United States for contravening anti-money laundering laws and other cases, which continue to cause anxiety to our regulators. Currently, there are approximately 16 companies in Bermuda's company registers who employ 40 to 50 people. In the industry's presence and returns worth Is the industry's presence and returns worth the reputational risk which is currently being bestowed on Bermuda? Is our robust digital asset regulatory framework being used as a tool to attract fintech companies? The Center of Evidence-Based Management indicated that Bermuda can provide legitimacy to these companies so that they can attract investors for the high-risk and high-volatility industry. As a jurisdiction, we need to pay very close attention to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission and provide increased scrutiny when it comes to crypto companies, especially those who wish to transition to publicly listed companies. In 2022, the SEC failed to issue approvals for a number of companies which applied to go public and be listed on a reputable exchange, according to the January 25th edition of the Wall Street Journal. This action resulted in the loss of confidence in the crypto companies as financial stresses and failures and losses spread across this volatile industry. Revised tax structure. Mr. Speaker, the Fiscal Responsibility Panel regarded 2019 as a year of missed opportunity, and this position remains today. It's not just because of the further delay in meeting the target of a balanced budget, it's because of the absence of significant tax reform which was proposed by the Tax Reform Commission and the Fiscal Responsibility Panel. Added to this, there is also the easing of the government's fiscal targets, facilitated by the suspension of contributions to the Sinking Fund. The Fiscal Responsibility Panel also recommends that the country should brace itself for a revised tax structure. The panel feels that the current structure is unsustainable in addressing Bermuda's economy. In real terms, this means more taxes for the people of Bermuda, and as they believe that a reasonable tax revenue as a percentage of GDP should be around 19 to 20%. This is an increase of approximately $190 million over 3 years. It should also be noted that with the imminent embodiment of the Tax Reform Committee, a more fair and equitable tax structure should be examined. Recently, we had the topical issue of the proposed restructure of Bermuda's payroll tax structure. Mr. Speaker, the new tax proposals announced by the Ministry of Finance are likely to have a significant negative impact on the economy by solely targeting international business sector and virtually no one else. Factually, IB is the only economic growth engine in Bermuda. They've already infused millions of dollars of taxes, corporate spending, and spending by their staff. The other leg of our economy, which is tourism, was dramatically weakened by the impact of COVID, the closure of the Fairmont Southampton and the Albert Beach Hotel. There are no other sectors of significance in size other than the public sector. Mr. Speaker, the first rule of public finance for a jurisdiction like Bermuda is to mitigate its spending to the greatest extent practicable. When the OBA was the government, we reduced public spending by 12% without laying off anyone. Since that time, spending has increased to levels not seen since 2012. So far, we haven't heard anything from the Minister of Finance regarding the cuts in government spending. The irony is that he is demanding that IB increase its funding of a government whose spending is out of control. This is what business means when they say that the PLP proposals are not responsible. It is not responsible because the payroll tax hits IB especially hard, as traditionally they pay both the employer and employee portions of payroll taxes. The OBA fully supports the examination of a progressive tax system, which is fair and equitable for all stakeholders. We believe that all taxpayers should share in the tax burden to some degree, and all taxpayers reap the underlying benefits from government services. Therefore, we do not agree with the proposal that those earning below a specific amount should have zero tax. Low earners should pay proportionately less, but not zero. Interestingly, in its pre-budget report, the government indicated that it was looking to IB for new taxes when they cannot collect the millions of taxes they already owed. Somehow, it has never been able to effectively manage and effectively collect its own back taxes. Mr. Speaker, on Bermuda's general tax reform, we should consider fiscal responsibilities, recommendations, and position. They take the view that our government tax revenue to GDP ratio should fall between 20 to 20.5%, because the current level and method of taxation is dated and is not working for the country and or our people. In addition, we should have a clear philosophy and ensure that there is an equitable balance between consumption taxes, capital taxes, and labor taxes to support the national tax framework. But before anything can be done, the government must clearly define its taxation philosophy to the people of Bermuda. Tourism. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda tourism industry is in crisis, a real crisis that has never been seen before. Mr. Speaker, according to the tourism minister, and I agree, cruise travel is critical revenue earner for Bermuda's tourism economy. According to government statistics, Bermuda has enjoyed a strong cruise ship season, with 116 calls to Bermuda by mid-September. The team at the BTA project that the cruise visitor volumes will be up to 400,000 passengers, contributing $162 million to the local economy. As the pandemic has waned and Bermuda has relaxed some of its stringent requirements, unvaccinated travelers are now being allowed to Bermuda, and the industry has been energized by news of more welcome changes to come. Mr. Speaker, airlift and hotel capacity have not yet returned to pre-pandemic levels. Hotel inventory has proven to be the limiting factor in the island's bid to restore air capacity. So the growth of our hotel bed count is a pressing need for tourism recovery. While it is a challenging environment, there are some promising developments on the hotel front. Azora Limited has announced that it will complete its final phase of construction this fall, and that its second property, Nautilus, is progressing well with sold-out phase 1, and hotel opening is slated for 2024. The Bermudiana Beach Club Hotel, a Tapestry resort by Hilton, is set to add 110 much-needed hotel rooms to inventory in 2023. Likewise, Rosedon, which has developed an award-winning sustainable farm-to-table culinary model at the property's restaurant, will open its boutiques hotel next year with 12 luxury rooms. Cambridge Beach has invested in renovations to the property and the opening of the new food and beverage outlets. But the Southampton Princess remains the greatest question mark regarding Bermuda's tourism recovery. Without this hotel, Bermuda's tourism renaissance will be stymied. Mr. Speaker, looking at our cousins to the south of us, on January 9, 2023, the Caribbean Tourism Association indicated that in 2022, the Caribbean was one of the fastest growing recovering tourism regions in the world, with some destinations recording arrivals more than 2019. All Caribbean destinations are expected to reach or exceed the 2019 level in 2023. Some destinations are expecting to make dramatic strides in the cruise ship arrivals this year. The U.S. Virgin Islands expects to have 450 cruise ship calls with 1.4 million people. Arrivals and stopover visitors and tourist arrivals for the same period, for the period January to September 23, presented some interesting figures. I'm not going to go through all the speakers because of time as a speaker, but what I will do is just share, as I said, the statistics presented by Tourism Analytics and the CTO. So for the period January to September 2022, for airline stopovers, Jamaica had 1.8 million people, Bahamas had 1 million people, U.S. Virgin Islands had 728 million people, Barbados had 380,000 people, and Bermuda had 113,000. This is telling, Mr. Speaker. When it came to cruise ship visitors, for the same period, January to September 2022, the Bahamas had 3.5 million cruise ship visitors. Virgin Islands had 800,000. St. Martin had 500,000. Belize had 500,000. Cayman had 500,000. And our Bermuda had 300,000 for that same period, January to September. Regarding the tourism product, more investment is needed in our beach facilities. Mr. Speaker, I have the question. Why has there not been an allotment to add changing facilities and bathroom facilities at the Albert Beach, which is a very popular beach for both locals and tourists all year round? In addition, may I also invite the Bermuda Tourism Authority to craft a concierge-type service which collects and delivers our guests to local tourist events and establishments on the island. To facilitate this process, it is our opinion that Bermuda should have a management plan which markets and promotes local tourism products and activities like carnivals, harbor nights, the Egg Show, Cob Match, Bermuda Festival, and other local events. Also, before we go into the next topic, which is Southampton Princess Hotel, can the minister please confirm how he plans to help our taxi drivers, our tourism ambassadors? What benefits will they receive? As self-employed professionals, they should not be paying both the employer's share of payroll tax and the employee's share of payroll tax. How will this anomaly be addressed? Mr. Speaker, now I will move on to the Fairmont Southampton. Mr. Speaker, as we all know that the Fairmont Southampton closed in 2020, resulting in the loss of more than 700 jobs. It also cost the PLP government $11 million in loans for redundancy benefits, which were later recovered. It is our understanding that project financing may be in place, and there is an existing massive cloud hanging over the development project's future. There are those who have indicated that once the pending special development order is completed and finalized, the hotel complex may be prepared for sale. There are others who feel that the emphasis will be placed on developing and selling the said villas to allow the owners to develop and developers to enjoy a capital income stream which will feed the various developmental phases of this massive development project. Its future is also in doubt because of the continued escalation of the cost of financing as a result of the U.S. interest rate hikes, the pending global recession, the ever-increasing cost of cement and associated construction costs, and the general supply chain challenges. There are also questions around competition and closing of the overall development agreement between government and the West End Development Company / GenCom Limited. Mr. Speaker, this project is crucial to Bermuda. As PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, indicated, there was an impact report done on this topic, and it indicated in 2019 that 25% of Bermuda's, the hotel provided 25% of Bermuda's hotel room inventory. It provided 31% of Bermuda's hospitality industry workforce, and 35% of our air visitors' arrivals stay at the hotel. Going forward, it will provide 716 new construction jobs and $44 million of net additional impact on our GDP in 2022. If the hotel remains closed, it will have a $80 million negative impact on Bermuda's GDP in 2022. The negative impact of GDP considers the loss of conferences due to limited spaces for large conferences, thus the loss of visitors to the island. Mr. Speaker, the PwC report said that based on the operator's projections, if GenCom and any other investor does not proceed with the transaction or renovation and shuts down permanently, the opportunity cost is estimated to be $60 million in 2022 and up to $118 million in 2025, or an accumulated cost of $404.1 million for 4 years from 2022 to 2025. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to be frank. Bermuda is desperate to have this 600-room hotel and convention facility reopened within the next 2 or 3 years, as the rebirth of this landmark property will boost staffing levels, provide career pathways for professionals in the hospitality sector, and revitalize Bermuda's tourism industry. Can the Premier be honest and confirm where we stand with this multi-million-dollar project? With all the twists and turns, the One Bermuda Alliance will watch development of this critical project with forensic focus. Morgan's Point. Is this going to be Bermuda's version of Cayman Islands, Cayman Bay? What is the overall objective of this project? Why is the government competing with its newly released plan to boost residential development along with restaurant and retail complex in Hamilton, Somerset, and St. George's, which will provide opportunities in the retail and hospitality sector? Mr. Speaker, given the fact that the government has not built or opened a new hotel in the past 20 years, this reimagined complex sounds like a fairy tale. Is this a betrayal of our commitment to tourism because of the government's inability to close on the Fairmont Southampton hotel deal? Mr. Speaker, again, this reimagined complex sounds like a fairy tale. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Birch is bullish on the proposal of Morgan's Point, although this plan raises some questions. Mr. Speaker, as the Royal Gazette indicated, while it makes sense to finish the buildings on the site, and it also makes sense for the buildings to be used as housing and possibly to drop the hotel element of the project, the government is undertaking all of this, and this gives rise to uncertainty, as the Premier has said himself and has admitted. Mr. Speaker, it appears that the government intends to borrow $130 million for the first phase of the project, with at least part of that borrowing secured by a government guarantee. So, $130 million will be borrowed with the help of a guarantee to recover the $165 million that the government had to spend to make good the guarantee its predecessor in government committed to. In addition, the government spent a further $50 million for restructuring the project and paying other creditors, sorry. This seems to mean that before recovering any money, Bermuda will be $295 million in the hole, and each of the 100 units will cost approximately $1 million to build. Mr. Speaker, when Premier Byrd was the Shadow Minister of Finance, he rightfully warned against issuing guarantees to businesses, noting that they were needed only when there is doubt as to the ability to repay. The fact that he should now be proposing one for Morgan's Point on top of the $75 million guarantee given to the Fairmont Southampton seems a little bizarre. Mr. Speaker, is he now having a reality check? A guarantee will be vital for the debt financing as the environmental remediation challenges still plague the site in some of the underground caves. Mr. Speaker, this looks like another Bermudiana Beach complex waiting to happen, and I truly hope that is not the case. Digital commerce. Mr. Speaker, while on digital business, may I take this opportunity to be a bit flippant? And I mentioned it to you earlier. With all the Premier's IT and digital skills, can the Premier please explain why a digital copy of the estimates of revenue for the year 2023 was not prepared when he, the Minister of Finance, presented the government's budget for the same fiscal year? Can he ensure that this happens next year? Thank you. Mr. Speaker, quite a lot is being said about the opportunities in Bermuda's digital commerce arena, and the One Bermuda Alliance supports this discussion. With Bermuda's legislative and regulatory and telecommunications framework and its digital communications infrastructure, we stand ready to capitalize on this emerging and growing industry. Mr. Speaker, as stated by the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, the One Bermuda Alliance does not support this government's intention to own or promote a digital bank in Bermuda. This initiative should be driven by the private sector, period. Mr. Speaker, we recognize why the government is trying to do this. According to their 2020 platform, they want to create the Bermuda National Digital Bank, with ownership shares available to all Bermudians to invest and create wealth for future generations. The bank will allow for long-stalled industries like gaming to commence creating jobs, economic growth, while connecting Bermuda residents and entrepreneurs to the global world of digital payments. This bank will ensure that Bermudians can benefit from lower mortgage rates to reduce pressure on middle-class families, while lower rates will increase the value of existing homes. Mr. Speaker, the Fiscal Responsibility Panel in their most recent report said succinctly, and I quote, "A new digital bank will not address all the factors responsible for the lack of access to quality banking services by many Bermudians. Other potential issues include a lack of competition between banks and barriers to entry in the retail banking market, banks' access to retail customer credit scoring and other data, and other barriers to writing new business, strengthening consumer protection in financial services, payment systems, and the lack of liquidity in Bermuda's residential real estate and secondary mortgage-backed securities markets. Also, inhibiting access to finance in the absence of any requirement for business to provide routine financial statements or accounts, and the absence of a clear legal procedure for handling companies' failures in this non-financial sector. For all small businesses, this may hinder their access to capital. As the Fiscal Responsibility Panel said, we expect the provision of robust training and internship programs and the creation of new jobs for Bermudians. In addition, from a taxation perspective, the digital sector will benefit from traditional tax schemes currently in place in Bermuda, such as company taxes, payroll taxes, and land taxes. The PRP government should consider the further examination of a negotiated value-added tax for the privilege of booking their local and global internet business earnings in Bermuda. This approach is not new, and the industry is familiar with it. Mr. Speaker, the One Bermuda Alliance is also concerned about some CEOs who have violated foreign corruption, trading, and international sanctions laws locally and internationally. We take the view that enhanced Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering investigations need to be completed before these senior people are granted permission to operate in Bermuda by the government and the Bermuda Monetary Authority. Mr. Speaker, we have had more than our share of investigations by the SEC, the U.S. government, and other international agencies. Mr. Speaker, in fact, I recently read that 3 federal agencies in the U.S. have suddenly issued a wide-range warning on the dangers posed to banks by crypto asset risk. Recently, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Office of Control of Currency jointly listed a number of key issues associated with crypto assets and crypto asset sector participants, of which they said banking organizations should be aware. The warning is said to be linked to the significant volatility and exposure of vulnerabilities in the crypto asset sector experienced over the last year when crypto exchange FTX filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection in November. There was a collapse. This collapse shook the volatile crypto market. It caused a near domino effect that saw more than 100 linked companies file bankruptcy or suffer heavy losses. The market lost billions in value. Bermuda's gaming industry. Mr. Speaker, in the past 2 or 3 years, the topic of gaming has been very popular, as it is an amenity which can support our ever-evolving tourism industry. Mr. Speaker, the Gaming Commission issued 1 license and 1 provisional license to 2 of our world-class resorts. As you know, recently one of these resorts indicated that they no longer were keen on moving ahead with their gaming offerings because the legislative framework and operational frameworks are deemed to be very challenging and cumbersome. Moreover, the banking component of the structure had not been resolved, even though we are making progress in this space. I've been advised that the delay in gaming lies squarely at the feet of the Premier, and that the banking matter can be resolved if the Premier does what is required. Again, the Burt government has failed its people with its empty promises. Mr. Speaker, there are other local stakeholders who believe that the overarching Gaming Commission legislation must be amended so the Commission is independent of government influence and interference. It should include the removal of the requirement that a government representative sit on the board of the Commission. In fact, it was noted that the Gaming Commission should have the same type of independence and autonomy as the Bermuda Monetary Authority. In addition, one of the local banks has indicated that their U.S. correspondent bank would be receptive to moving forward with the banking gaming proceeds if the ultimate responsibility for gaming is removed from the Premier's purview, and that the Premier should also relinquish his role as the Finance Minister. Mr. Speaker, as most in our country are aware, the current government has indicated that operationally, Bermuda will be progressing with a cashless gaming solution. What does a cashless gaming solution mean? Are we talking about credit cards only? Are we looking at cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Tether? through blockchain solutions. Transparency is required as potential operators who were prepared to invest in this industry are not clear on government's cashless gaming direction. This matter must be resolved soon. Considering all of this, we must get it right, as government has the responsibility to fulfill its obligation as prescribed under the various hotel development agreements. Mr. Speaker, I'll now move on to immigration. Mr. Speaker, immigration reform has been a thorny and very emotive issue for successive governments of Bermuda and her people. It has been a political football, and with the aid of successive PLP governments. But despite this, the Progressive Labour Party has begun to make progress in this space. The government is finally beginning to recognize that Bermuda's workforce and population must be expanded. Mr. Speaker, they are finally accepting the fact that expanding the current workforce is crucial, and consequently a good immigration policy is a good economic policy, something that the One Bermuda Alliance has been stating from its inception. We need a minimum of 10,000 new residents to bolster our economy. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We need thousands of bodies in our island who will bring jobs or create jobs. As stated in last year's response, Rishi Sharma, 10 Rules of Successful Nations, states increasing populations have accounted for roughly half of economic growth, and that if the population is shrinking, it is close to impossible to generate strong economic growth. As the European Commission stated in 2005, never in history has there been an economic growth without population growth. Mr. Speaker, for the edification of our community, let me explain why our workforce is so crucial. Having more working people in Bermuda means greater payroll tax collection, more local consumption, which increases customs duty. A greater residential population creates a multiplier effect on two of our biggest buckets of tax. When it comes to healthcare costs, guest workers are generally younger and healthier than our average resident. Increasing the number of guest workers massively improves the sustainability of our healthcare system. Aging population. Increasing the working age population with all these staying the same directly reduces our maintenance ratio. Total health costs and aging population are closely intertwined. Global compliance requirements. Many companies are going to have to do more to justify their presence in Bermuda under the new tax regime. We are competing with other jurisdictions on this front and must represent a welcoming attitude. Narrower economy. More working age people on the island decreases the load factor per person. Mr. Speaker, keeping it real, our economy, social wellness, and security are inextricably linked with immigration, more so than nearly any other jurisdiction. We are a service economy with no physical exports and only two industries, one of which produces much of the foreign exchange, employment, and tax revenues, which is international business. The time has long been spent. The immigration review must start now, and immigration reform just makes good business sense. International business. Mr. Speaker, in preparation for this debate, we spoke to a number of stakeholders and in the international business arena, and I'd like to share with you some of their comments. Mr. Speaker, PwC Global recently released a survey of 4,410 global chief executives in 105 countries, including Bermuda and the Caribbean. The findings of the survey suggest that they have one of the most pessimistic outlooks for international business in more than a decade. The survey also found that 73% of CEOs around the world believe that global economic growth will decline over the next 12 months. Nearly 40% of these CEOs think that their organizations will not economically be viable in a decade. If they continue on their present path, the pattern is consistent across a range of sectors, including insurance, telecommunications, manufacturing, healthcare, and technology. Mr. Speaker, CEO confidence in their own company's growth prospects also declined by 26%, the biggest drop since 2008 to 2009 financial crisis, when an 8% decline was recorded. Considering this, CEOs face an incredible challenge to reinvent their businesses for the future. They are seeing multiple direct challenges to profitability within their own industries over the next 10 years. More than half believe the changing customer demand and preferences will impact profitability following the changes in regulation, taxation, labor skill shortages, and technology disruptions. In financial services, CEOs cite regulatory change, 60%, as the biggest potential source of industry disruption, followed by evolving customer preferences, technology shifts, and labor skill shortages. Inflation and macroeconomic volatility and geopolitical conflicts top CEOs' concern. Mr. Speaker, not surprisingly, the war in Ukraine and growing concern about the geopolitical flashpoints in other parts of the world have caused CEOs to rethink aspects of their business model. To mitigate exposure, companies are increasing their investments in cybersecurity or data privacy, adopting supply chain, and adjusting their geographic footprint. Climate risks do not feature as prominently as a short-term risk over the relative to the other global risks. This was the case as well in the insurance sector, where CEOs ranked it as the fourth biggest risk they face over the next 10 months, while inflation was number one. Closer to home, Mr. Speaker, a Bermudian lawyer identified shifting reinsurance market trends that could also alter the future of the cat bonds and the issuance of insurance-linked securities in the year ahead. Appleby lawyer Brad Adley noted that hard reinsurance markets could be expected to last 3 or 5 years, but there has been no rush to market of new investors in the wake of the heavy catastrophe claims of Hurricane Ian. Mr. Speaker, in preparation for the debate, the One Bermuda Alliance met with a number of international business leaders and have attended several IB events, and the message is very simple. The government is not taking the war on human capital seriously enough. I repeat, the government is not taking the war on human capital seriously enough. They must consider the competitive landscape and that Bermuda employees' costs are 15 to 20% higher than in other jurisdictions. Added to which, Mr. Speaker, is the remote worker who can deliver their services digitally from anywhere in the world. And costs continue to escalate, whether it's food, healthcare, housing, energy, government services, immigration permits. They indicate that human resource expenses continue to rise and now form approximately 22.75% of their total operating costs. This situation is untenable in the insurance and reinsurance markets as the underwriting margins become thinner and thinner. IB also made it clear that the Premier's budget speech that the 86% of Bermuda's workforce will pay less in payroll taxes next year. Their question to this is, where is the balance of the 14% coming from? IB takes the view that the majority of the 14% will be coming from the international business sector and middle-class Bermudians. This will also have an adverse impact on attracting senior and specialist employees who already come at a higher cost, and some CEOs may redeploy them to more competitive and less expensive jurisdictions. ABIR made it clear that because of the spiraling costs and the difficulty in having their employees assimilate in Bermuda, they are currently reviewing their options, as the government's charges will have a negative impact on their businesses. Mr. Speaker, in the past, a number of these IB companies have been quiet and were not prepared to vent their anxieties publicly. But more recently, their concerns have become overt, which is out of character for them. They indicated that without thorough consultation, they were shocked when the government floated the introduction of new disruptors to their business in the pre-budget statement. They said that the proposed increase in payroll taxes and fee bands that are aligned to the company's assessed capital, they were aggrieved, frustrated, and surprised. They were disheartened by the government's friendly fire. They believe that their organization should be spending most of their energies and resources in addressing the OECD BEPS initiatives and competing with the EU, Dubai, Switzerland, and London, and our friends to the south like Cayman. They should not have to continuously look over their shoulders to see what the government is doing to draw from their arsenal, to fire at them. Where is the synergy? Where is the certainty? Where is the respect for those businesses who help our economy? They take the view that with the new payroll tax and the inefficiencies and uncertainties prevalent in the Department of Immigration, they must reassess some of their decisions. They feel that these new taxes are divisive and will be punitive for them to continue to put heads and bodies on the island. In addition, they cannot come to terms with the increase in taxes across the board when the PLP government cannot recover or collect the $30 million in accounts receivables on existing taxes. Mr. Speaker, if we cannot manage these taxes, Bermuda will look like clowns when it comes to managing the pending tax harmonization initiatives coming down the road because of the OECD's BEPS program. Mr. Speaker, let's be real. IB is operating in a truly and globally competitive environment. And these companies are quietly shifting rules out of Bermuda to where there is more certainty, more cost efficiencies, and more value for money. Quietly, through attrition or non-renewal of work permits, jobs and positions are dripping to more competitive jurisdictions. This is partially attested by the fact that in 2022, ABIR members employed 87,000 employees around the world. There are 37.94 thousand people working in the US for ABIR companies. There are 34.28 thousand people in Asia and Oceania working for ABIR companies. There are 8,000 people working in the UK for ABIR companies. There are 5,000 points working in the EU for ABIR companies. Mr. Speaker, guess how many employees are working in Bermuda for ABIR companies? 1.3 thousand. 1.3 thousand. That sends a clear message, Mr. Speaker. Let's build on the things that this industry has achieved and done well. We should nurture our golden goose and not strangle it. Global minimum tax and tax reform. Global tax reform is an ongoing matter for most jurisdictions, and many nations are responding and readjusting their fiscal frameworks accordingly. In fact, there appears to be tax arbitrage amongst many jurisdictions. To remain competitive, Bermuda must be best in class in terms of talents, infrastructure, immigration, healthcare, housing, and lifestyle. Mr. Speaker, despite these challenges, in principle, we in the opposition support the direction taken by government. We agree that it's too early to estimate what impact the global minimum tax is going to have on Bermuda's future tax structure and tax collection. In addition, we have yet to determine how we are going to manage the complexities which arise as a result of developing the appropriate framework for Bermuda. In addition, we will also monitor other jurisdictions to see how they are going to adopt the OECD's minimum tax initiative. As far as we know, the U.S. Republican-controlled Senate has grave concerns about the initiative, and Singapore has indicated that the earliest that they intend to implement it is 2025. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to receiving the details on those who will be appointed to the International Tax Working Group, who will be charged with examining how Bermuda will implement this global agreement while considering the diversity and complexity of our international business sector. We also look forward to receiving their findings and recommendations in their report, which is due in July of this year. Pensions and pension funds for investment. Mr. Speaker, government actuaries have indicated that the public sector pension fund will be depleted by 2044. Imagine what that sounds like to a young person at the beginning of their career. This simply does not happen, cannot happen. If we stay on this trajectory, we will see even more young Bermudans emigrating. We must encourage them to stay and attract talent back to Bermuda. They need to see and believe that they are returning to something that will offer them real opportunities. Mr. Speaker, once again, the PLP government is silent when it comes to unfunded liability for our public service superannuation fund, the government health insurance fund, and the members and legislature and the ministerial fund. For the record, it stands at approximately $1.7 billion based on the latest Auditor General's report and the latest government's actuarial report. Will government employees have a pension that they can draw on when they retire in the years to come? Mr. Speaker, this question is not unreasonable, given that the total liability due to our pension plan participants and government note holders now stands at approximately $4.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, if we're going to be truly transparent, we should note that this government funded some of the stimulus programs on the back of pension funds and the pension holiday, which only kicked the can further down the road. Mr. Speaker, accounts receivables to government. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance confirmed that the government is currently owed approximately $340 million in taxes and fees and are only prepared to recover a paltry $7.5 million this coming year. This is a mere 2.3% of the outstanding balance. Mr. Speaker, what is going on? Again, another government failure. Mr. Speaker, with the improved enforcement policies and procedures and the improved infrastructure investment for debt collection, surely the expected recovery should be at least $62 million, $62.5 million, which is approximately 20% of the outstanding receivables. Mr. Speaker, we understand that ORS Inc. and PwC were hired to address and recover these funds. PwC was paid approximately $4.2 million for their services. How much did the government pay ORS Inc., an unauthorized collection agency, for their services? As the minister indicated in March of last year, by not collecting these funds, the government cannot address or deliver the services that that people of Bermuda voted to receive, such as the development of infrastructure projects like schools and road repairs, or issues associated with health care, pensions, youth programs, and many other social initiatives. Interestingly, on another note, in July 2021, government overpaid $3.5 million in unemployment benefits during the COVID-19 lockdowns, which was admitted by the Minister of Finance. About 2,500 people were overpaid, on average, $1,300 via unauthorized payments by senior civil servants because the applicants did not inform the government that they returned to work and continued to receive money. Who is being held accountable? When will these receivables be cleared? Mr. Speaker, now I move to capital expenditures. Mr. Speaker, the government has earmarked a lofty $96 million for the 23-24 fiscal year. We understand their intent, as this forms part of Bermuda's economic recovery plan. But Mr. Speaker, let's be honest. There could have been a far less expensive allocation for capital expenditures if we had proper and ongoing maintenance programs for our roads, buildings, and beaches. We don't allow our homes to crumble before we decide to work on them. And the same should apply for our government real estate and other assets. They all need to be managed and maintained from day one. Mr. Speaker, it's shameful that the ferry docks in St. George's became inoperable. It's shameful that the swinging bridge in St. George's has been out of commission for years. It's shameful that the floating docks at the Hamilton Ferry Dock is one hurricane away from being inoperable. Look at the challenges faced at the Times Bay Race, which resulted in the temporary landfilling and inconvenience to the Pembroke residents. This is a trend that must stop now. Mr. Speaker, the Premier is correct when he states that the lack of the needed infrastructure investment has caused the risk of catastrophic failures which we face today. On the positive side, we support the capital investments in our schools and the development of our community health clinic in Somerset. We also support the upgraded facilities that house government employees, which include Government Quarry, DPT Depot, and Marine and Ports. We also support the replacement of the aging public vehicles for Bermuda Police Service, Bermuda Fire Service, and the Department of Corrections. And we finally support the upgrades to our court facilities and the increased funding of our paved roads. Mr. Speaker, I now go into banking reform.
Mr. Officer, before you start, just make a point to the research point. Hoping you see there's still quite a few more pages to be read. We do have a long day ahead of us. I'm going to suggest that we break and do our lunch at this time and come back at 2 o'clock and we can start that heading presentation. Okay?
That's fine.
Maybe you'd like to move this forward?
Mr. Speaker, I move that we adjourn lunch until 2:15.
2 p.m. Thank you.
Right.
Members, we now adjourn until 2 p.m.